So if you don't see it, you never know.
Okay.
Awesome. Well, I have a new friend on here, Bill. I initially called him Mr. Bill, but he said, no, don't call me Mr. Bill. I'm too young for that. So I have a friend on here named Bill. And today we're just going to be having a pretty candid conversation in regards to racial reconciliation. So my name is Brittany. If you have not met me before, I'm the founder of Feast at the Table, which is an organization that I started about 2 years ago, and it's all in regards to racial reconciliation. People coming together once a month for dinner and us talking about race, justice, and more than anything else, how can we live out a racially reconciled life through the cross? So I have, again, a guest on here, Bill, and we actually met, I think it was last month. Yeah, I think last month.
6 weeks ago.
6 weeks ago? Oh yeah, that is true. And we'll tell you why. So we met through a book discussion that I was having. The book discussion was called Cast. And there was a group of people that I had never met before. And Mr. Bill was one of them. And the first time that he got on, I was like, oh, I have to interview him. I like him. So that is what we are doing today. It probably won't be like question and answer style, but just more so of, like I said, a very candid conversation in regards to where he is in life, where I am as well. So I'm just going to start off with asking Bill to tell us a little bit about himself.
Okay. All right, Brittany. Well, we are friends.
Yes, we are friends.
Pretty fast. The book was Caste, C-A-S-T-E, and I became pretty convinced that that's what we really have in our society. But about myself, I'm 83 years old. Been retired for about 25 years from P&G, and I belong to a Presbyterian church in Hyde Park, and an awful lot of the nurturing I've received has been through that church. The leadership and fellow members. It's been a rich experience for my wife and me. We've been there 50 years, actually.
Wow.
We're old timers. We've been in our house for nearly 50 years. On reconciliation, actually, it is a journey, and sometimes you get jolted. And I'd say during the pandemic, I have felt a need to make good use of the time, and it's a very boring time. You can't go anywhere. You can't be with people face to face. I don't even say face to face anymore. In person, we avoid the faces.
Yeah.
And well, at least during the season and fall, the summer and fall, I've been able to be with some friends once a week. We call ourselves, there's 6 of us, we meet for lunch at a park and discuss what we're reading. And all of us are reading books on reconciliation. And it's just we didn't meet for that reason. We just met to talk about what we're reading, but we seem to have a pretty solid interest along that line. I think this year we've had some good instruction at church. I don't know, where do I start? I've gotten into quite a reading mode, so I've read several books on the subject, and right now I'm reading Just Mercy by Brian Richardson. Read Caste and How to Be an Anti-Racist, and Me and White Supremacy. And I think that book started me off. I'm in another group. My wife and I are in another group at church, and shortly after the Charles isn't Ferguson? Is it Ferguson?
And was it the George Floyd piece?
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
Charles Floyd. After that incident, we were Zoom meeting with our friends at church, and I said, maybe we ought to explore how each of us is in some way a white supremacist. I didn't know what I was talking about, but I really didn't gain any traction with the group because maybe I didn't frame the question the right way. But I started exploring myself with me and white supremacy, and began to learn about privileges I have that, Brittany, you probably don't have. I'm very sorry to say. I have a lot of privileges that you don't have. And it isn't, the more I read about it, the more wrong it became. And meanwhile, my church has been very active with a partner church in East Westwood. And about 5 years ago, a group of perhaps 25 men from our church met with the men and boys from our church, met for breakfast with the men and boys of that church, a breakfast meeting. And it felt so good. It just felt like we're on to something. And I really had awfully high hopes for it. And we've been at it ever since that time. Not during the summer, but otherwise weekly until the pandemic. And I've tried pretty hard to make connections with the young people in the church, and I haven't been very successful. So I think you were asking me, what am I going to do with what I've learned? Well, I might have to ask you, but I've tried pretty hard, and I don't feel like I've, and it could be just a simple thing of age difference. But on the other hand, there are others. I mean, I've really put myself out trying to get to know the kids, and it hasn't worked very well.
Now, the church that you have been partnering with are the young men like African American young men?
Oh yes.
Okay.
It is definitely, yes, it is.
Okay. Well, I think already you just making that step. Is this some form of like a mentorship, or tell me a little bit more of what that looks like?
Okay. Well, more recently, I'd say if we've been together for 5 years, the last year only has the leadership there said, let's make this a mentoring arrangement.
Okay.
And I am not a mentor. I wasn't at the original meeting. Actually, I was. I took someone new to the meeting and had to leave early to get him to work by noon. So as they were forming mentees and mentors and doing some of this, I was gone. And so it got started when I wasn't there. But I thought, well, I'll see how it goes, and I'll inquire. But since I hadn't really been able to make solid connections with the kids, I thought, I don't think it's going to work for me. So.
Got you. So I do want to stop right there. You said, you might help me to find some things that I need to do. I just want to pivot and state again why I even wanted to have this discussion with you. When I first heard Bill speak, when we were having the book discussion, there was something about him that just popped up that just illuminated about him. And I was just like, oh my goodness, I have to know more about this man. So to be 100% honest, I never thought our paths would cross in my life. You were the last person I thought I would be interviewing, a older white man. And I'm just like, what? What is going on? So the fact that you are taking the time to insert your life into the lives of maybe people that you have not previously had connections with, you're already moving in a wonderful direction. I have a lot of white people ask me, what should I do? What's my next step? And it's just taking it bit by bit. You doing the book discussions, you reading up on things, being intrigued, wanting to know more. I commend you. That is awesome. And I'm just gonna say it. Someone of your age, that's what touched my heart the most. Oftentimes you will hear people say, once you get at a certain age, you're just like, you know what? I'm set in my habits. I know what I know. I'm comfortable. But when I see you in that book discussion and I hear, you know what, I actually started to mentor young men who don't look like me. You're already moving in that direction towards racial reconciliation and also understanding more about maybe a people group that you maybe have not previously. So that's what's up. Yeah. That's okay. Great. So
I've also, I did really want, I mentioned this to you, that I'm not unique. Mm-hmm. There are a lot of people, well, I mean, I know quite a few people who have a concern level at mine. It's pretty similar to my own. Mm-hmm. And I can tell you, in the few years I have left, I really want to see some change. I really do. Mm-hmm. I've had the opportunity, my childhood friend, he's down in Charleston, South Carolina, and he and I have had a lot of chance to do FaceTime together. And I recommended to him a couple books that he has thanked me for putting him onto it and getting into it. And he's into a book group now that's discussing these things.
See?
So I'm pleased about that.
Good.
So, yeah, I'm not going to move mountains, but it's, yeah, we want things to happen.
Yes.
I guess I should mention that when I was in college, I was in a fraternity that, of course, was exclusive. I haven't followed through the years what their behavior has been, but I think it'd be minimal integration, if at all. And one of the things I want to ask is, what are you doing now? What is my college encouraging the fraternities to do? And what is my fraternity doing? Are they taking advantage of an opportunity to make friends that they have never, an opportunity they've never had before? Bringing brothers in who have a different complexion than they do, well, I'm hoping they are, and I want to press for that.
Now, is that part of the change that you want to see? You said that in my lifetime, I want to see change. What does that look like for you?
Well, I'd like to see a lot of change. I know that economically, the whites are generations ahead of the blacks. We know that. That won't catch up in a short time. But it can begin this, fairness that would allow economic improvement. Well, I want equity. I want justice.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Strangely, I was at one of our breakfast meetings. There was a leader who was talking about how the kids should behave with the police, and one of the boys said, "Well, should we try to be friends with them?" And I don't want to misquote him, but he says, "I wouldn't. I'd stay away from them." And I stood up and I said, "This is unbalanced." And boy, I was shouted down. They said, "Look, this is a war zone we're in. This is not Hyde Park." And he caused me to, I quieted down and started listening. And of course, when I see what happened to Charles Floyd, I recognize, and then that wasn't new, but it was certainly vivid. And so anyway.
Well, I think the fact that you brought up the fact that you were willing to listen, that a thought that you had, you were willing to be challenged in order to learn
Sure.
more.
Sure.
I think that's huge, because a lot of people that are coming into this is newfound knowledge. These are things that maybe they never even considered. For a lot of people that I may have spoken to, just actually realizing that racism is an issue has been like a light bulb that has gone on for people. Now, for you, it doesn't necessarily sound like that is not something that you considered, but you are learning more, you're digging deeper into it. And I think that is awesome, because it really does start with listening. Can you tell me a little bit more about some of the things that you have learned from listening, or even some of the books that you've read?
Yeah, and I tried to come up, I have a Kindle, and I download samples all the time, and so I've got an awful lot of books on there, and I tried to go through and find them all. But what I'm looking at my notes here. Me and White Supremacy,
Mm-hmm.
How to Be an Anti-Racist, Just Mercy, Caste, and then a book that my church's book group of 40 people has been reading The Water Dancer.
Ooh, mm-hmm.
And it really gave a pretty vivid description of slavery. And actually, I started reading Uncle Tom's Cabin, and I didn't get very far. I didn't stay with it very long, but I got my wife interested in it. And I think she read to a point where it became too difficult for her to read. Mm. And so these are, and then a bunch of books I really want to read. Beloved is pretty close to the top of the list. Waking Up White is one I've heard about. Something mentioned in our small book group is Bridges Out of Poverty. Another one is Why Don't They Just Get a Job? And boy, what I've heard about that, and that's a locally written book. That's
really
Cincinnati. Yeah, Cincinnati. I think there's an organization called Cincinnati Works.
Oh, okay. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And I'm guessing that people highly involved in that organization.
What is that book about? I can kind of get a little bit from the title, but you can tell me a little bit more.
I can't tell you a lot more.
Oh, you said you haven't read it yet. That's one of the books you want to.
These are books. No. These are several of these are books I am thinking. I want to get to.
Okay, gotcha.
But I've read about 4 or 5 during the pandemic,
mm-hmm.
and really kind of saturated with it. But it's a heavy subject.
It is.
Okay. Yeah.
So I would love to know a little bit more about, I think it was, you said Me and White Supremacy, that book?
Oh, Me and White Supremacy.
Yes. Yeah. Was there anything that you took from that book that really jumped out to you?
Well, yeah. It's broken down into the subjects of white privilege, white fragility, something called policing. And that's a concept I think you kind of insisting that blacks talk the way you want, say things what you want to hear or something like that. I'm not quite sure. And all the books, I would say, take us back to slavery and say you got to accept where this country came from, and what we have been holding on to for quarter of a millennium. And because if you don't understand that, then you can't begin to understand the problem. We caused the problem, whites caused the problem, and expect blacks to work their way out of it.
Preaching.
Oh, another thing I learned is that Europeans who came to America didn't know they were white until they got here. And then they learned, oh, yeah, there are whites and blacks, and what you don't want to be is black. So they quickly recognized that they had something over a fifth some part of the large number of the population.
Well, I do like the fact that you said, looking back at the historical roots and where a lot of this derived from is really important in order for us to look at history and say, we didn't like that. We don't want to, pretty much do the same thing over, which in some areas we kind of have, but I do think it's very important for us to look back at our history, see where things have derived, so we're not making the same mistakes. And even though, yes, a lot of this has started with white people, what can we now do together to move forward? And I think that was one of the greatest things, that when I was able to see you and the others that were on the book discussion, it was, how do we fight together? Because me as a Black person, we've been fighting for a very, very long time. And we need our white brothers and sisters to fight with us. And it gets tiresome when you're the person who you're been oppressed, but you're also the person who's just like, you got to fix the problem, you need to teach. So I love the fact that you're able to say, you know what? We as white people have caused a lot. What are we going to do now? And me as a Black person, my thing is like, yes, that has happened, but what are we going to do together? Because all of this is affecting both white and Black people, and not just white and Black people, it's affecting people in general. So how do we work together? So I just love the fact that you said that. How can me and you, Bill, continue to work together to fight this?
How can you and I work together?
Yes. What are we going to do, Bill? How are we going to fix this?
Well, we're going to remain friends and maybe cultivate that friendship.
Yes.
I've got the time if you, my wife and I have the time if you do.
Okay.
Brittany.
I have the time.
She told me, she's been eavesdropping on the Zoom meetings. She's letting me have privacy tonight.
Okay.
But she said, I'd really like to know Brittany. And I said, well, I would too. Yeah.
Yes. So people, listen, this is the first time that me and Bill have actually been able to sit down and talk. So a lot of the things that Bill is saying, I'm learning about him. So when I say it's just a candid conversation, it is. We're just flowing wherever this conversation takes us. So I like what you said, Bill. The reason why this organization is called Feast at the Table is because I want people to come around the dinner table and just have conversation, get to know one another. I feel that dinner is like one of the greatest equalizers. Everyone eats, and usually when I'm eating, I'm pretty happy. And usually when I'm eating with people, it's people I want to be around and it's people I want to know. So I think that friendship and just cultivating those true relationships is a way for me to be able to get to know you, to step outside of my echo chamber and to break bread with you. So I think friendship is key. It's a lot easier to empathize with someone when you're able to say, you know what, that Black person on TV who just got shot and killed, like George Floyd, or excuse me, he did not get shot, but who was murdered like George Floyd. When you have friends who are Black, when you have people that you care for who are Black, it's a lot easier to be able to empathize rather than, I know no one Black, I talk to no one Black, I have no friends who are Black. It's just, there's this connection, there's this empathy, there's this solidarity that comes with having friends who don't look like you and understanding their struggles as well. So I want to be your friend. I want to get to know you more.
Good.
Yes. So let's do this. And I'm going to invite you to one of our dinners. So we can't have them right now, obviously, because of COVID. We have been having dinners in the park, but it's getting pretty cold outside. But, when all of this blows, and I believe that it will, invite me over. Okay. Break out the lobster, the fancy stuff. I'm an expensive friend.
We'll see what kind of friend you are.
And I'll bring water.
Oh, shoot.
But I don't have much. Do you have any remaining remarks? I just wanted them to know who you are. And yeah, that's fine.
Well, I did tell you during one of the Zoom meetings that I'm old enough to have experienced some Jim Crow, a Jim Crow experience. My sister lived in Virginia in 1950, and as a 12-year-old, I rode the train for 18 hours down to Norfolk, Virginia, Newport News, Virginia, and in Virginia, I saw plenty of white and black drinking fountains, restrooms, diners that were restricted, and it was very real.
Wow.
Very real. And yeah. Wow. Well, I think we've covered a lot.
We did. So this was a pleasure for me. I'm sure there's a lot more that I can learn from you, and I want us to learn from each other. But I thank you for taking out this time with me today. And
well, thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely. There will be many more conversations in lobster.